And the number one worst exercise for your hamstring, the absolute worst one, I hate this one, I hate it, hate it. Coach Greg, and today we're going to be going over the 3 best and 3 worst exercises for your hamstrings. The list I have is, of course, up for debate, but these are the best in my opinion and the best for me and for most people. Some may be better or worse for you depending on your experience and training level, strength size, and so on. And starting with the 3 best, in number 3, the SUMO deadlift. I chose the SUMO deadlift over the other forms of the deadlift only because I like it more. I feel it more. I have done more SUMO deadlifts in my lifetime than probably 99.9% of people. I previously set a Guinness Book of World Record for the SUMO deadlift, and I've always had impressive hamstrings. You're gonna debate me? My hamstrings arguably are my best body part, and I hardly train my hamstrings. Of course, my hamstring development has a lot to do with my genetics, but I owe a lot of its development to me doing the SUMO deadlift. I get a great stretch in the hamstrings, and I can really feel the hamstrings working during this movement. For you, if you don't like the SUMO deadlift, of course, change it up, do a different form of deadlifts. But for me, it's the best one. Not only is it the best for my hamstrings, it's safer on my lower back. I'm less likely to get injured. Of course, I've done conventional deadlifts. I've done all kinds of deadlifts over my lifetime, but the other forms cause me the most amount of pain. I've even had more injuries. I have an L4, L5 herniated disc for well over 2 decades. SUMO deadlifts are a safer exercise to do, less likely to cause damage to your lower back, and going to build up your hamstrings. Number 2, and this is a tough one. So if you don't have a lot of strength and you're a beginner, probably not going to be the 3 best. But if you're strong and you know what you're doing, you have experience, the glute ham raise. This is an amazing exercise for the hamstrings. Very, very difficult. It's even difficult for me, and I have really strong hamstrings. What I suggest, if you're not an advanced trainer, that when you do this exercises, hinge forward at the hip. So in other words, bend forward to make it easier than last time. The last thing you want to do is train with such a heavy weight that you can only get a couple reps. You're trying to get at least 10 reps or more to keep the proper amount of time under tension on the muscle to build the hamstrings. While performing this exercise, be sure to control your body at all times. Go slower on the eccentric than the concentric. Take your time. It's not a race. You don't want to hyperextend the back, and you want to keep constant tension on the hamstrings. You don't need to go all the way to the bottom. You're going to get plenty of muscle stimulus. Just keep control while doing this exercise. And number 1, the most important hamstring exercise you can do, and this is for all athletes, whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced, the number 1 hamstring exercise is the seated or lying hamstring curl. The reason I chose this one, even though it's not as hard as doing a glute ham raise, is because it's easier. It's harder to screw up. You're going to have less of a chance of making a mistake, getting injured, or doing it dangerously. Safety is paramount when training in the gym, and doing a seated or lying leg curl, these are safe and effective exercises that anyone can do. And why did I lump these together? Because they're equal. You can argue with me whether the seated or the lying one is more effective than the other. They're equally effective, and I like them both the same. When I do in fact train hamstrings, which isn't that much, I usually do one or both of these on any given leg day. You're saying, well, why don't you train your hamstrings? Because I don't have to. My hamstrings are already well developed, and I don't need them to get any bigger or better. They're already good enough. So when I'm training legs, I focus on the quads because that's the muscle I want to grow more than my hamstrings. Maybe you're the opposite. Maybe you have freakishly amazing quads and crappy hamstrings. Well, for you, you're going to want to focus on your hamstrings. So with any training program, it's important to focus on the muscles that you want to train. Just because I don't need to train hamstrings doesn't mean you don't have to. So, for example, when training other leg exercises, let's take the leg press, you're going to want to put your feet higher on the platform in order to engage the hamstrings. When I train the leg press, I have my feet very low on the platform in order to focus primarily on the quads. So, within any given exercises, you can adapt and change it so that you're focusing on the hamstrings. If you're doing a hack squat, V squat, Smith machine squat, place your feet further forward. By placing it forward, you're going to put more emphasis on the hamstrings. What else can you do? You can also place your feet wider. Placing it wider, oftentimes you'll feel the hamstrings engage more on exercises like the leg press or a Smith machine squat. And what about your toes? Should you point them straight ahead, out to the side, or out to the middle? You can do all three. Mix it up. Find the one that you like the most and vary it from time to time. When I do it, my toes are almost always pointed straight ahead. I'm not worried about focusing on inner or outer hamstrings. It doesn't matter to me.
It doesn't matter!
If you want to focus more on your outer hamstrings versus your inner hamstrings, it's okay to vary your foot position, but for the most part, just do it where it feels the best for you. And how many sets of hamstrings should you do total for the week? Between 10 and 20 per week, preferably split into 2 training sessions. That means you should be doing 5 to 10 sets for your hamstrings per session twice a week. If you're a beginner, aim for 5. If you're more advanced and you're not more sore than last time, aim for 10. If I even do 5 sets, I'm sore, so I don't even need to do them. Oftentimes, I won't even train any specifically focused exercises for my hamstrings. But the day after doing leg press or any kind of squatting motion, my hamstrings are more sore than my quads. So you can see, these exercises, although they're the favorite of mine, they might not be the favorite for you. I feel my hamstrings just by getting up off the couch. They are always sore. I don't need to worry about them. So maybe I'm not the best person to listen to. The people with the best built muscles, they're not always the best people to listen to. If you see my hamstrings, you're like, wow, your hamstrings are amazing. Maybe that's genetics. Somebody else might have more poorly developed hamstrings and they have to do even more than somebody with better developed hamstrings. That person might know more. So you can debate me if these are the best or worst, but they're the best for me, for my body, and what I benefited from. So I'm just telling you what's worked for me and for the clients I've coached. So hopefully this helps you, the 3 best. But what about the 3 worst? Let's see. What are the 3 worst exercises to build your hamstrings? And in no particular order, except the 3rd one I'm going to mention, I hate the most by far. But the other 2, I'm not sure which one's worse. So the 3rd worst exercise to build your hamstrings is halfway down squats. You know, the squats that 90% of the people at the gym are doing. Not full squats, not squats to parallel, half squats. People are out the gym ego lifting, they put the weight on their back, they walk back and they squat halfway down. That's great to build the quads, but it's not doing much for your hamstrings and not doing much for your glutes as well. When you go lower, you're going to get more activation of the hamstrings and glutes. So if you're doing halfway down squats and saying, oh, that's enough, I don't need to worry about my hamstrings. Big mistakes. You want to ensure that your hamstrings are properly developed because you want to make sure that you're training your hamstrings as hard as you're training your quads. Most people have stronger quads than their hamstrings. Ever seen a 100-meter dash? Oh, I pulled a hamstring. Do you remember fellow Canadian Donovan Bailey running up against Michael Johnson in the 150-meter dash to find out who is the fastest man on earth? You know, Michael Johnson, he said, I'm the fastest man alive. Donovan Bailey's like, dude, I won the 100-meter dash. Let's run 150 meters and see. And he's running and, oh, I pulled a hamstring. Did you really pull it? But in fact, a lot of people are pulling their hamstrings. Pull the hammy. Happens all the time. Not as often do people pull a quad. So do not neglect your hamstring training. If you're going to the gym and you're only doing halfway down squats and you're not focusing on the hamstrings, because let's face it, we like training muscles that we can see. We can see our chest and we can't see our back, and most people prefer training chest over back. We can easily see our quads when we train, but hard to see the hamstrings. They're back there, unless you got eyes in the back of your head. So most people neglect their hamstrings and overtrain the quads in comparison. Not everyone's like me and has lucky genetics and their hamstrings are well developed. No, most people have to work their hamstrings harder than last time. And not only does this tip apply to the squats, it applies to any leg exercise. If you're doing leg presses or Smith machine squats or V squats, any kind of squats, and no, I didn't say V, I said V squats. There's a V squat machine at the gyms I go to. If you're only going halfway down, you're not going to be activating the hamstrings nearly as much as if you use a full range of motion and squat or leg press to 90 degrees. So if you do want to focus more on the hamstrings, here's a tip. Do full range of motion when you're performing leg exercises. Number 2, the stiff-legged deadlift, especially with heavy weights and with the legs completely straight and when locking out. A lot of people are doing this exercise incorrectly. You don't need to lift the weight all the way up to the top. When you get to the top, the hamstrings are relaxing. You don't want to hyperextend the lower back to lock out the weight at the top. Stop shy of going up to the top. You only need to go to about 70 degrees. Keep constant tension on the hamstrings when performing this exercise. Do not hyperextend the knees. It's called a stiff-legged deadlift, but it doesn't mean your legs should be locked out. It means it should be stiff. Kind of like when doing a forehand ground stroke playing tennis. Your arm is locked like a 2x4 when swinging the racket, but you don't swing it with the arm completely straight. There's a bend. If you don't have any bend in the knee, you're very likely going to get injured. Be careful. Same as if you swing a tennis racket with the arm completely straight. You're going to put a lot of force on the elbow, can get injured. See, I used to be a phys ed teacher. Didn't know that, did you? Well, some of you did. Used to teach tennis. My recommendation is be very careful with this exercise. Use extremely light weights, especially at first, until you know you're doing the exercise correctly. Don't lock out the weight. Keep a slight bend of the knee and reach forward and really feel the stretch and go through it in a very slow and controlled fashion. And the number one worst exercise for your hamstring, the absolute worst one, I hate this one, I hate it, the standing single leg hamstring curl. You know the one, you're standing there and there's about 100 pounds on the rack and you put it on the lightest weight and you can only lift it halfway up. It sucks, I hate it. It's there in every gym and people are doing it and you lift it and it's halfway up. It's light as a feather at the bottom. You can move the whole stack, but if you get it up halfway, you're lucky. You can't go through the full range of motion on this standing leg curl. I don't know why. I don't understand it. I hate it. If you don't hate it and you like it, well, you're not me. I'm not you. So whatever. So the problem is if I put any kind of a decent weight on it, I can't lift it halfway up. So to get a full contraction on this exercise, I can only lift a 10-pound weight. It's so easy at the bottom, but yet it's hard at the top. So I'm not getting proper tension throughout the range of motion. It's only hard at the top. I find it pointless and useless and I hate it. Not to mention, you do the whole thing on one side, then you got to do it again on the other. It takes longer than doing other exercises. So why do this exercise when there's a better alternative? You know, the number one method, lying or seated hamstring curls, do that one instead. So let me know, do you agree or disagree? Do you also hate the single leg extension? I hate it, do you hate it as much as me? Or is there just something wrong with me? I've never been able to do this exercise properly or effectively. I hate it. Maybe you love it. If you love it and it works for you, keep doing it. I'm not doing it. You'll never find me doing it. If I do it, I'm just doing it and I'm angry because I can't lift any weight. Ending it here. GregDoucette.com for coaching. Greg Doucette, IFBB Pro. Bloops are over there. Watch one of them. Follow me on TikTok, Instagram. Subscribe to my newsletter. Buy my freaking cookbook, trading book. Make me richer than last time. And until next time, I'm getting richer than last time. And I'm out.